Welcome, everyone, to the first ever Kiss Mafia podcast. Super excited to be here with you. My name's Corey. And you know what? I'm just going to be doing a Kiss podcast my way in 30 minutes or less. The things I want to talk about. And I want to hear from you, other Kiss fans, what your thoughts are. I'm open to anything. And I want to hear, what do you want me to talk about? What do you want to hear about? All that great stuff. So I'm going to start off today. I'm just going to get right into it. It's the 30th anniversary of the Kiss reunion tour, which is mind-boggling to me because I remember it like it was yesterday. And I want to go back to the beginning, the things that precipitated the reunion, and whether or not, hardcore Kiss fans were even into the concept at the time. Some were and some weren't. I'm going to share my thoughts on that. So let's go back to the beginning here. Really, it all started 1995. In Burbank, California, with the Kiss Convention. Now, the Kiss Conventions were this traveling convention that went around, and I was fortunate enough to go to it in 1995 in Toronto, where I am. And I'll certainly do another podcast on that because there's so much to talk about. That was such a great day, such great value. But Kiss was basically going around, town to town, bringing, the whole Kiss thing with them. And in Burbank, what happened was Peter Criss decided to show up, their former drummer, right? So at that time, it was Gene, Paul, the two originals, and he had Eric Carr and Bruce Kulick traveling around. And it was fantastic. They did all requests, unplugged sets. It was fantastic. It was great. There's tons of videos of it online. Like I said, I'll certainly cover it in another episode. But Peter Criss decided to show up, and show his daughter this whole Kiss thing. He'd been out of Kiss for a while at this point, going on maybe 15 years. So he wanted her to see what it was all about. And of course, during the unplugged set, they called him up on stage, and you could tell that started something. That was really the start of the reunion tour. You got to keep in mind this is 1995. The band hadn't really played together since probably, 79, maybe 80 was their last album. But, Peter Criss didn't really play much on that album. Anton Fig sort of took over the drumming of that album. So was the rumor anyways. And there was a spark there, for sure. Shortly thereafter, the whole Unplugged craze was going on, the MTV Unplugged. You had all the big grunge bands were doing it. And I remember joking with a friend saying, how funny would that be if Kiss did an Unplugged, because they're the opposite of an unplugged band. They were just like raw, loud, everything like that. I think the only band that didn't get in on the Unplugged, by the way, was probably AC/DC. That would have been an interesting one because I can't see them unplugged. But anyways, Kiss did Unplugged. And at that point, not only did Peter come up, but so did Ace. And they did some songs together. So something was brewing. You could tell in the Kiss were the rumors were swirling. It was one of those things like every band where, it was going to be, it was almost an impossibility that the original band would get back together because there was just so much animosity. But, time heals everything. And eventually they got back together and it was magical. It really was. And I remember at the time thinking, do I even want a Kiss reunion? Do I? As a hardcore Kiss fan, because at that point, if I'm being completely honest, and as a kid who grew up in the 80s, I really liked the current incarnation of Kiss. I really did. Like I said, Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Bruce Kulick was fantastic. Eric Carr was my drummer growing up. That was who I remember. Like I said, if you grew up in the 80s, that was Kiss. That's who you liked. And, they were the ones producing new albums. At that point, unfortunately, Eric Carr passed away. Eric Singer is very much alive and well. And he stepped in as the first blonde in Kiss. So that was kind of weird. I had to accept a blonde guy in Kiss. But, he was so cool and he was easy to accept. And the band was great. You know what? It wasn't too far removed from the Revenge album, which was a great album. It really was. That's a top-tier album in my mind. I know Kiss fans... anything can be debated amongst Kiss fans. What was good, what wasn't. But, you're growing up in my era, at my age, when that album dropped, it was great. A lot of my friends who weren't even really big Kiss fans, loved that. They loved seeing Domino on, Much Music here in Canada or MTV. Got a lot of playing time. Unholy was unreal. It really was. It was a top tier Gene Simmons song. I mean, you could argue with me that Unholy might be one of the best Gene songs ever. And I would listen to that argument because it really was. So, as a hardcore Kiss fan, I was it. I wasn't looking for the reunion. I'll be honest with you. I'd never seen Kiss, the original members. I'd seen them all. I'd seen Ace Frehley solo. I'd seen Peter Criss and Ace, the Bad Boys of Kiss tour. I've seen them. It was all good. To me, there was like kind of a nice mystique about the original band. So again, as a hardcore Kiss fan at the time, I gotta be honest, it wasn't even really something I wanted. It wasn't. That might sound crazy now, and looking back, it certainly saved them. It certainly made the band. I mean, there was a lot of pluses, but at the time, it just wasn't something. I was happy. I was happy with the current incarnation of Kiss, but it was inevitable after that Unplugged thing because there was chemistry there. There was no denying it. When you saw them on stage, it was the six of them at the Unplugged, and when they got up there and did those few songs together, it was magical. And that was inevitable. You knew it was going to happen. And I was cool with it. I was like, you know what? I'd never seen Kiss in the full garb, the full show. I've seen many Kiss shows up until that point, non-makeup shows, which I was very happy with. And now they were going to come back. And I thought, in my mind at that point, I thought, okay, so, the originals will get back together, do a tour, and then, Eric and Bruce will rejoin the band and they'll just continue as it was. Well, as it turned out, they put the makeup on and it basically never came off, right? And the originals, after that, they put together a couple albums. They went on tour. It was a whole thing that I wasn't expecting. And like I said, didn't necessarily want, but looking back, I got a nice, 20 plus year, almost a 25-year run of some awesome Kiss concerts. So it was very cool. They started out famously in Detroit, sold out Tiger Stadium within, 40 minutes or whatever it was. So this was a big tour. So Kiss was, because I saw the Revenge show and, they were great shows, but, maybe it was 10, 15,000 people, like arenas, not completely sold out, but like what was cool at that point though, those were hardcore Kiss fans. Like those were the people that kind of just stuck it out the whole time and they never really, veered from Kiss too far. Now all of a sudden with the reunion show, like I had friends in high school that like Kiss because I like Kiss, and I'd introduce them to them. They come over to my house. You come to my house, in my teens, even early 20s, we're listening to Kiss. That's what we're doing. We're hanging out, but Kiss is blaring in the background, or I got Kiss Confidential on TV or something, but it's all Kiss related. And that's just who I was. That was part of my identity, and it's kind of cool. One of the cool things about being a Kiss fan is that non-Kiss fans look out for you. Right? Hey, I saw this cool thing, this article about Kiss and blah, blah, blah. They'll send you stuff. It's kind of neat, actually. I really do appreciate it. And so what happened was my buddy Marco, who I'm still friends with today, went ahead and bought 10 tickets. Because back then, I guess there was no limit on tickets in Ticketmaster in 1996. We bought 10 tickets to the Kiss show. And man, it was like a feeding frenzy. Everyone's coming up to me. Well, we want a ticket. Make sure I'm in on that Kiss show. And, in the end, 10 of us went. And it was fantastic. And we had a great time. And everybody that was there, me and my buddy Marco, a couple other guys there were like sort of kind of hardcore Kiss fans. We were the guys that went to the conventions and were always into Kiss. My other guys, they were fans, like I said, because I was fans. And they liked the music. I played them enough stuff. I could sit someone down, pick out the right Kiss tunes, and make anyone a fan. But no matter what you like. That's the beauty of Kiss. There's so many different eras and things and whatnot that you can pull from to make somebody understand it. And, it was great. We all went and every single person there walked out saying, that was the best show I've ever seen in my life. Like they've been to other concerts. Like that was the best. And it truly was. We saw it here at the Sky Dome in Toronto with the Sky Tent configuration, which is basically sort of half the dome cut off. But, that was basically, not a full stadium, but bigger than an arena. Maybe it was like 30,000 people, 20 to 30,000 people. It was a good size. The sound, in dome stadiums is not the bad. I don't remember it being bad. I remember thinking it was pretty damn good because it was so loud and it was just one of those things that you'll never forget. Like I said, I didn't want it at first, but when I got to see it again, it was like, yeah, this is magical. And what was amazing about that is that, like I said, from 1996 to 2023, and I was fortunate enough to be at the very last makeup show at Madison Square Gardens in December 2nd, 2023. In fact, I even had my golden ticket. But so I got to see, I got a pretty long run there. Yeah, 25 plus years, man. 27 years really of awesome Kiss shows. And over the years, I'm just coming off the cold. I brought a lot of people to Kiss shows, right? So, hey, you never been to a Kiss show? You got to come. So I guess I broke a lot of Kiss virginities, as it will. And everybody that went always loved it. And there were so many tours over the years. It's kind of sad now that here we are in the summertime. It's the 30th anniversary of the reunion tour, and I'm not going to see Kiss. For so many years, it felt like every other year I was going to a Kiss show, and I didn't just see them here. We go to Montreal, Detroit, which is not too far from where we are. There were so many great places. Buffalo, got to see Kiss shows there. And so the reunion tour, in hindsight, like I said, I was a big, big Kiss fan of the current Kiss at the time. But the reunion really brought them to the masses, where they stayed. And they stayed there for the rest of their career. I'm not so sure if they didn't do the reunion tour that we're talking about them today, right? Not in the same vein. There's no question. The reunion tour, in hindsight, was everything. It was the biggest grossing concert of that year. So, as much as I was hoping that, okay, we'll do this tour, this will be cool, I'll get to see it, sow my wild oats, as it were. But then we'll go back to Bruce and Eric, and everything will be cool. We'll just go back to that. And no, there was too much at stake. It was too much of a success. I think it was a bigger success than anyone thought it would be. And, your subsequent tours that went from there, Psycho Circus was unbelievable. And it just spawned a whole other generation of Kiss concerts and created a new generation of Kiss fans. So it was cool. It was kind of cool now all of a sudden to see everybody sort of being into one of my favorite bands, seeing what I liked all along. But it definitely changed the landscape of history. No question about it, right? I feel like, if I look back now, 95, 96, Carnival of Souls, where would it have gone? Probably not much further. Again, it would have just been the hardcore Kiss fans, and you really do need that young blood and that new generation to sort of keep it going. So, to keep the legacy lasting. So it accomplished more than I think anybody thought it would. And I always said, now this is a little morbid actually, but what the heck? I always said, if Kiss went down in a plane, okay, at the end of 1977, okay, think about that. They got their first 3 albums, then they did Kiss Alive, which was groundbreaking. Like it changed the game in terms of live albums moving forward. It doesn't get enough credit for what it did for the live album in music history. It really doesn't, but the Kiss fans know how important that album was. Then they come back, they follow up that with Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, Love Gun, then Alive 2. Now, Alive 2, the album cover alone is the reason I'm a Kiss fan today. Seeing that front cover, Gene with the blood, it was just like, it was literally demonic. And then opening the gatefold, just one of the best rock photos ever taken to this day. This is in 1977, way ahead of its time. Right now, I was a little bit older because I was a baby in 1977, but seeing that album was like, I got to know about these guys. I got to read more. I got to know more. I got to listen to this, and it was right up my alley, and the artwork and everything was so amazing. But like I said, if Kiss had gone down at that time, this is a horrible thought. But they would have just been like the mystique and the aura around a band that had that run. Their run from 74 to the end of 77 was unparalleled. Unparalleled. They went from obscurity to the biggest band in the world. This was their peak. 77 was the peak of Kiss. You hear a lot of people say, oh, I love old Kiss. I'm like, yeah, I get you. I like old Kiss too. But that was the absolute peak for those guys, and it would have been. It's funny how we probably would have looked back if things didn't work, but they did work out. Like I said, I don't want to dwell on what would have happened if Kiss didn't make it, but it's the 27 Club, right? And the lore that surrounds that. But they didn't. They stuck around for 50 years, over 50 years now. So the reunion tour was super important. It was, and it changed everything, and I grew to love it. I was fine with it. I said, you know what, this is Kiss now. And then, sure enough, eventually down the road, Peter and Ace again. The friction starts. By 2000, they're doing their farewell tour. In theory, farewell to the originals, and the original four never played again together after that. And I did get to see that show in Montreal, actually, and it was fantastic. But eventually Eric Singer came back in the makeup. Tommy Thayer came back in the makeup, and some people have a problem with the non-original guys in the makeup. I personally, don't care myself. I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of the members of Kiss over the years, and I have met Eric Singer a couple times, and Tommy Thayer and Bruce Kulick, and they're all super nice. They're super, super nice guys. They love the fans. So, it was, they kept the Kiss train rolling, and Paul and Gene. Now, that being said, I think it requires Paul and Gene always. They're the ones. We'll see. Here we are in 2026. Like I said, 30 years removed from the original reunion tour, which was groundbreaking, not just for Kiss. It really inspired a whole slew of reunion tours. Like, once the people saw what Kiss accomplished with their reunion tour, Van Halen, Guns N' Roses, all these bands that we thought would never, ever get back together, somehow made it work, man. Because, I think the money's too good and to rekindle. So it was really cool that we got to see all these bands come back. Not necessarily in their prime, because, they're years removed from when they first came out, but we got to see the originals, which was very, very cool. So I'm happy. I certainly don't begrudge the reunion tour, but at the time, I guess I was letting go of a little piece of Kiss there that I really liked, and I knew in my heart of hearts it wasn't coming back. It was too big, but I liked small Kiss. Like, I liked seeing Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, the Bad Boys at Kiss tour, in a small club of less than 900 people. I like seeing Ace Frehley at a very small venue. It felt like maybe 200 people, in West Toronto here. That was amazing. And, Kiss in just, just more intimate environments. So that was all changing. That would never go back, really, right? So, the reunion tour, 30 years. Can't believe it's been 30 years. I do remember it like it was yesterday. It was a great time. I'm glad it happened. And, here we are, man. Here we are. Kiss is, they're still going. So, they're not touring and stuff, but, there's still a lot of fan fests and things going on. And, it's all good. The memory lives on. I don't know I know it wouldn't be the same if they didn't do the reunion tour. So it was good. It was good. I'm glad it happened. And, here we are. Like I said, it's 2026. This band that got together in 1973 is still being talked about on many different podcasts and many different people. So, by many different people, and I'm glad I got to be part of it. I'm definitely glad I got to be to see it. And I've kind of when Kiss retired in 2023, I kind of retired from concert going myself, because it's also at a point where a lot of our rock heroes just get a little too old. We don't want to see them. I'm not even going to get into that. But, I saw Motley Crue a couple years ago, and that'll never happen again, right? So, and I love Motley Crue too. But, these bands, AC/DC's coming to town. God, our favorite bands are pushing 80, or they're in their 70s, and it's just not the same, But so we're so happy we got to see them in their prime and, at their best. And, like I said, a lot more topics that I want to get into over the years. Maybe over the years with this podcast and these thoughts. I'm always want to hear what you want to hear about. And this has been fun. Like I said, short and sweet. Love to hear from people, what their thoughts are. Kiss fans, I know, can be a very divided bunch in what we like and what we don't like. That's cool. That's great. That's what it's all about, man. I don't expect everyone to like things the way I like them, and vice versa. So, thanks for coming for episode 1 of the new Kiss Mafia, and I hope to see you again. Thanks for coming out. Cheers.